Welcome, Natalie. So amazing to have you here, actually. It's quite unique circumstances that brought us together, and I'm sure that'll come out as we talk through your story. But just to get started, can you talk with us about, I know that when you married in your mid-20s, first time you got married, you didn't have any intentions of having a family, having children, and that changed for you at some stage down the track. So talk us through when you realized you wanted to become a mum, between that time and the 4 or 5 years later, whatever it was, a few years later that you actually became pregnant. Talk us through that time. What happened over those years?
A lot. When I got married, I was living in India and in a spiritual community that was, I guess the culture of the community was actually to not have children. So the viewpoint there was, how I view it now, is a very masculine viewpoint that having children was a distraction to a certain degree from the spiritual path, or what would lead to a negative attachment, which was not helpful on the spiritual path. And I agreed at that time, and I felt that I didn't want my life to be sort of bound in this emotional attachment that family does inevitably bring. And we can talk about how we met, but my partner at that time agreed. And that was kind of the basis of our marriage in a lot of ways, was this decision to pursue this spiritual practice called Vedanta, and all that was associated with it, which was a certain kind of disciplined lifestyle that certainly kids does not allow. And that's what I wanted, but I was also very, very young, and I think in a lot of ways disconnected from my feminine side. I had a lot of trauma around my mother and my father, a lot of trauma around family in general. And I didn't really understand at that point how trauma relates to our decisions. And my decision to not have children, independent of my relationship, just the decision to not have children, I think came more out of, ultimately what I came to came more out of my family trauma and my fear of reenacting certain things than a true heartfelt decision within myself to be child free. And now that I have kids or have a child, I'm like, I totally understand why somebody would not want children. And my teacher in India was absolutely right. It does distract you from your spiritual path in a way that he was talking about. It distracts you from your discipline and all of these things. So that's true. But when I think I was in my late 20s, early 30s, Glenn and I had returned from India to Los Angeles, and we were teaching Vedanta in Los Angeles. And at that point, I felt really disconnected from myself. And I was wearing these robes from India and playing this role of this spiritual teacher that was absolutely not who I was. And I was deeply unhappy inside. So there's nothing worse than being spiritual on the outside and unhappy on the inside, or being like a spiritual teacher on the outside and unhappy on the inside, because there's like a level of hypocrisy. And I was like, this is not who I want to be. This is not who I am, but I don't know who I am. So I actually sought out counseling at that time, and I sought out therapy. And so I went to see a therapist, and she encouraged me to look at, and I was looking for a career. What do I want to do as a career? And this all kind of relates to my decision for children. Um, and I was really, really interested in natural medicine. When I was in India, I wanted to be an Ayurvedic physician, and that had always been my interest. And she's like, have you checked out Chinese medicine? And I was like, yeah, that's so weird. Last week, I wanted a free acupuncture treatment. So I went to this school and I pretended I was interested in their school, and I got a tour and to get a free treatment at their clinic. And she's like, that school my brother went to, you should really check it out. it might be a career path for you. And I was like, no, I'm white. Like, I'm not Asian. How can I be an acupuncturist? I didn't even think it was possible. And she's like, no, there's a lot of white people who do this, or Westerners. And I was just, I don't know. I was really kind of like, it wasn't in my paradigm at that point. But I went back to the school and I inquired, and within 3 months I signed up. And so I started a master's in Chinese medicine, which is a 4-year degree in California. And in that schooling, when that schooling started, my mind started to really shift because I started to study energy medicine and the body and women's health and the meridians, and really get in touch with like the feminine earth energy. And it created like an unstoppable shift in me. I didn't really know what it was at the time, but in retrospect, I can see what was happening. It was, I think, like the birth of the feminine and the connection to mother and nature, and getting away from all my family drama and being like, wow, this is what we're made to like create, and all of these things came up. And so, and then I started to obviously see myself biologically, like the biological clock, and I would see women and mothers in my community, and I would start noticing, instead of feeling grateful that I wasn't having kids, which I used to feel, I was like kind of jealous. And I started looking on social media at mothers, and it's turned into this like snowball. And then obviously eventually I told my partner, and he was not supportive at all. And that led to the unraveling of our relationship as a marriage, not as a friendship, but as a marriage, because it became unsustainable. He was not willing to, he didn't want kids. And again, like now that I have a child, thank God we didn't have children, because if you don't want kids, you shouldn't have kids. Like, it's such a full-time thing. But at that point, I was like, I just would do anything. I just wanted that experience. But I didn't realize how much inner growth needed to happen in order to get to that experience for me. So the unraveling of that marriage forced me to find and heal a lot of that trauma that prevented me from honoring myself in the beginning, if that makes sense. So, like,
Mhm.
I had to be alone for the first time in a very long time. And in that alone solitude, it was like early 30s at that point, I did a lot of the healing work around my father and my mother, and around the feminine. And I started a dance practice, and I just started to connect to nature and female friends, and heal a lot of sister wounds, and grow a lot. And I started to date when we ended things, and reconnect with like my own sensuality and sexuality and power. And all of that then allowed me, I think, to really own my decision as a spiritual decision, because I had to get to the point where the path of becoming a mother, I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel like it was wrong. I didn't feel like it wasn't spiritual. If I had any of those feelings inside of me, I couldn't have really stepped onto this path. Even if I intellectually knew that I wanted it, I had to like get to a very deep place within me of undoing a lot of this like guilt around motherhood, around being a woman, essentially. And it goes really deep. I think we all have that like guilt and shame. It's like in the Bible around our bodies and all of that. So I had to do a lot of that healing work. And that took a long time. So let's say we ended our relationship when I was like 33, and I met my current partner when I was 36 and got pregnant at 37. So it was like a good 3 years of all of that. But getting pregnant then was super easy, and my pregnancy was easy, and motherhood's been, what it is, but it's been amazing, and my baby's healthy, and we're all healthy, and it's felt really natural. And with the challenges, there's been no depression or anxiety or anything like that. And I think all of that, yeah, is because I had to completely redefine my relationship to myself and to feminine energy in order to truly own this decision, not because society told me to be a mother, not
Mm.
because, other people were doing it, because it took a lot. I had to get to it myself. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What a journey. What a journey that must have been. And I can imagine that you said you met your current partner, the father of your baby, when you were 36. And at the time you were looking for somebody to not just form a relationship with, but to have a baby with. You had this vision, and I can imagine that at that age and with that vision in mind, there would have been a lot of pressure for you around, you know, the clock is ticking. I need to find the right person, not just somebody you know, who I'm attracted to, who's attracted to me, who we, have a good connection, but somebody who's ready to have children pretty soon, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And found him. Amazing. Um, it's quite interesting though, isn't it? How the universe tends to kind of, everything seems to align and sort of back us up when we've done the work, when we are, I guess, calling in, when we're very knowledgeable or specific about what we're needing and calling in. Yeah.
And it took a lot. I mean, in terms of, I do feel like I called in my partner. Um, and I dated for 2 years and a lot of interesting people. It was during COVID, so it was like everyone was online dating, and it was a very interesting time. And it's so funny how the universe works. Like the only other person other than my partner that like I was really interested in told me on our first date that he didn't want children, and it was like the universe was testing me
Mhm.
in terms of this decision. Like, do you, for some reason, karmically, this was like a big shift in my path. Like I could have very easily gone the road of no kids and in a lot of ways like been okay. But I had to make such a conscious decision to do it. And when I met that person and he told me he didn't want children, I was like, this is like some kind of joke. Like that I'm constantly having to assert, yes, this is what I want. And when I went on the first date with my current partner, we talked about it the first date. And he was very clear with me he wanted children, and I was very clear I wanted children. And I mean, he makes like he wanted kids more than me. Like he was like, I want 4 kids. And
Mhm.
so it was, I got the total, I mean, be careful what you wish for kind of situation, like the total opposite of what I had been in. I just had to be really patient, and also I did a lot of like spirit. I can't overemphasize the spiritual work, like the inner work, the connection to self, the daily practices, the clarity work in terms of for women who are seeking to manifest a partner. And I do believe that we do manifest, that it is an inner thing. And it's not, it doesn't just happen when we're older, I think, especially. When you're younger, it does kind of just happen because you fall into these like trauma bonds. But when you're seeking a conscious relationship as an older woman and as an older man, like you really have to craft what you want. And we both did that. So my partner had also been married before, had also been on a healing path, and that's where we united. It was like we're not, like we're coming together to create more healing, to have a conscious relationship, to create a family, like all of this. And so our postpartum time has also been really amazing. Like our teamwork has, even through all of, we have had a, like as I shared previous, a breastfeeding challenge, but it's been so great because we just have such good teamwork and we're so there for each other. And we've also like done a lot of the healing work and both been in therapy and all of that.
Mm. Mm. I I want to share, I guess, with the listeners now this connection. So your ex-husband, he was from New Zealand, was living with you in LA. When you separated, he came back to New Zealand, and he and I met online dating, and so that's the connection. Glenn is my partner now, and he a year ago he was over in Los Angeles for a few reasons, but part of that trip was spending some time with you and meeting Ivan, and he said that you had relayed, he was telling me that you had said that you wanted to start trying for a baby at the end of the year. And he had said to you, well, you know, when you get pregnant, you're going to have to get in touch with Carla, my partner, because birth is her thing. And
Mhm.
and the beautiful thing was that you did get pregnant at the end of the year. First try, you got pregnant, and you reached out, and so we connected, and it's been a really, really interesting journey for me because I've learned a lot. About how, you know, birth works in the US, which is quite different to the New Zealand system. But it was really it was such a powerful and beautiful thing to witness your journey from the beginning of that pregnancy through to giving birth, and now, you know, postnatally. And I'm really excited that you're keen to be on the podcast and share about this, because you know, there's some beautiful lessons for others who are other listeners to perhaps take on board about this journey that you've been on.
I just want to share on that visit
Yeah.
because, first of all, like, it was some karmic gift that you came into Glenn's life because he learned why it was so important to me, I think through you and through your work, why it was so important to me to be a mother, and that it wasn't just some, you know, fleeting societal pressure thing. It was a deep drive.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I remember when he was here and we were talking about it, and he was talking about natural birth, and he was lecturing me on natural birth and telling me how important it is for the baby to be born naturally and to be born at home. And he was like literally giving me, you know, how Glenn lectures. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, of all people, what is coming out of your mouth? And it was just so funny. I literally, I was just like laughing as he was talking about this because it was so far from his interest in any form. And suddenly he's this passionate, you know, advocate for non-hospital birth. Like,
I know it is a funny old world, right? Like this, you know, splits up with his wife because she wants children and he doesn't, and then hooks up with the most birth
midwife with
obsessed
3 kids.
mother.
So
You know,
fun.
my children are all older now, well, 14, 15, 24. So Glenn's had a little dabble in some parenting, but it's not the same
Yeah,
as
it's not the
raising a
same.
child of your own. And, you know, and the early years for me at least were a lot more challenging than my boys are at 14 and 15, you know, and
Yeah,
the
which is
24-year-old.
good. That
Yeah,
the
yeah,
teenage years also crazy. That means
yeah.
you did a good job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but I love this. I love how it all kind of played out, and how, you know, we each have served each other's lives in kind of different ways related to this. And yeah, but when you first got pregnant, you're in Los Angeles, birth hasn't been a part of your world for long, or, you know, you'd only sort of relatively recently decided you wanted to be a mum and started engaging in that world, I guess. So what was kind of your vision, or what did you expect or believe about birth, about pregnancy care? What did that all look like for you when you first got pregnant?
I mean, I really didn't know anything. I didn't even have I didn't have a gynecologist. I mean, I work in the field of women's health, but you don't really understand pregnancy until you get pregnant, I think. So I just had no idea, and I felt really overwhelmed. I was clear that I am this advocate for natural medicine, and it's what I do with my health in general. So it's like, why would I change my tune in this very important experience? So there was an intuition that I didn't want to go down the standard medical route. I was referred to a Western doctor who was a little bit more on the natural side as my first provider. And he started with ultrasounds, and I was like, this is a little much. And just his every appointment had an ultrasound. And I was like, this just feels like a little bit much. And then I started to listen to some podcasts, and I think through you get acquainted with the concept of um like an unmonitored birth. I don't know what they call it, but that kind
Understood.
of, yeah, just like and then I started to learn about free birth and to the total other side, and just I started to learn about different ways of handling pregnancy. So I can't say I knew anything when I got pregnant, but I'm such a student.
Mm.
And so my immediate thing was like, let me just get fully educated on all of the options. Like, what are different ways that people are doing this? And when I was in college, I had visited the farm in Tennessee. So, which is so funny to me now. It's like this weird mirroring of time. And I remember at that time, I had been so enamored with the concept of midwifery and these women on this property and giving, having babies there. And I thought it was so beautiful. And I completely left that on entirely 100%. And then there was this like return to that memory. And I started to read May Gaskin's work when I got pregnant, and I think it's like Rachel Gentle Birth, Rachel Reed, is it?
So there's the Rachel Reed book is Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of
Oh,
Passage,
that
but Sarah
one.
Buckley was Gentle Birth
Sarah Buckley.
Mothering.
Yeah. And then I think you know what it was really my breast reduction. As I started to read about successful breastfeeding, one of the main um, components to that was having an unmedicated birth. So, and I started to learn about oxytocin. That was through Sarah Buckley's work and
Mhm.
also your work. And it was like, because I had this, we'll get to the breast reduction, but I had this breast reduction. I had a lot of anxiety around breastfeeding, and I wanted to give myself the best possible chance of being able to breastfeed and I knew through reading and through learning, the best possible chance was an unmedicated birth.
Mhm.
So that required me to then learn about what that means and how do I achieve that. So then I went through this crisis of, am I going to do a home birth or am I going to stay with my current provider? And I
Why was
couldn't,
that? Why was that a crisis?
because I was really scared. It felt really scary to me. I didn't know, I knew one person who did a home birth in my community, but which is funny now because now I know like a ton of people. But at that time I knew one, and it's just not something that was done. No woman in my family had even, I don't think they even like knew what that was. It was seen as like stupid or irresponsible.
Yeah.
Um, Everybody gave birth at like the main hospital in Los Angeles. And so I, yeah, it took a lot for me to get over a lot of that fear that I didn't even know I had around birth and leaving the medical system. And then I saw the business of being born, which really helped me to shift my perspective. And I don't know what it was. It wasn't any one thing, but I slowly started to like want to get out of the medical system with my pregnancy. And then I met a midwife team that was the first provider that we interviewed. And they were like the first step out of the medical system. I didn't love them, but like they at least, it was like at a house, and it was this just a totally different energy. I would sit on the couch and they would, there was an ultrasound, but it was just different, and they would do a Doppler. It was just really different. And I was like, oh, this feels more like who I am. This feels better. And then I was referred to the provider I eventually chose, who actually is an OB, but she works in home birth. And I met her. I was like, okay, this is it. Like, and it actually was that connection. I felt so safe with her and so taken care of. And it wasn't because she was a doctor. I mean, obviously the fact that she's a doctor gives her like this insane amount of confidence that she lives with, because she home births twins, she home births VBACs, like she does everything. And I think her being an OB gives her that confidence, and it certainly translates into how she works with her patients. But all of our visits were home visits. She only comes to the house. She's like a friend. She would sit for an hour and talk, and it was just a completely different experience. And that made it made going to the hospital seem like insane.
Mm.
It suddenly turned for me, where in the beginning, home birth was scary and weird, and I have to kind of tiptoe around it. And I'm Googling, like, is home birth safe? And then over time, it was like, is hospital birth safe? Like, I don't think that feels really unsafe to me. And which is kind of my stance now, even though there's a lot of controversy around that. But it was a combination of my own research, my commitment to want to breastfeed, and meeting the right provider. And that's something that we talked about, was finding the team. And that really, which include you and other people in my life who encouraged this choice as being a safe choice. And once it was like, this is the point of safety. Like once I felt safe, it was like the easiest thing ever to make
Yeah.
that decision.
Yeah.
I think that it all comes down to where you feel safe. And intuitively, I knew I didn't feel safe going to a hospital, but it took a while to feel safe being at home.
Mm, mm.
So that it was like, I have to go somewhere to do this thing. But it took a while to get to the point where I was like, no, I feel 100% safe. And I'm really proud of myself that I got to the point where I felt undoubtedly 100% safe at home.
Yeah.
Like there was not a shred. And even with my team, there was barely a shred ever of a conversation of a hospital transfer, which
Mm.
is like in our world, whenever people talk about home birth, they're like, well, where are you going to go if something goes wrong? That's the first question
Yes.
everyone asks.
Yeah.
Where's the closest hospital?
Yeah.
Like my doctor couldn't care less. Like it was like not even in her realm that we would even discuss that as a thing, which is so interesting because that's where everyone's mind goes. Is like, but you're going to have to go to the hospital, right? And it's like, that's not even in our conversation.
Yeah, it is a huge journey to go on because we in our culture, in our society as it stands in this day and age, we are encouraged to view birth as inherently dangerous, and that is why we um, believe it's safest to be in the hospital, is because that's what we've been taught through multiple means. That's what we've been conditioned to believe from the get-go, is that birth is inherently dangerous, that we need medical input in order for it to be able to occur safely, and that we can't trust our bodies, and that we can't trust our instincts and intuition, that the experts know better than we do how to most safely get our babies born. And so there's a lot of unlearning to do, unpacking of these beliefs that we're not even that aware that we hold, really. We're just going with what you naturally do when all of your family has been doing it this way, or of course birthing in the hospital, like that's what everybody does. Of course I'm going to have an OBGYN, that's what everybody does. And then so it is a lot of work, not just because it's challenging, because you're having to like look at where the roots of your fears or beliefs have stemmed from, and that can be quite confronting. But also because you have got all these other pressures, right? People you care about, people who care about you, who are challenging what you're saying is your vision or what you're wanting for yourself and your baby. There will have been Ivan having his opinion on things as well. And so there's a lot going on. And again, the clock's kind of ticking, 9 months. Thank goodness it's a 9-month and not a 9-week gestation period. But even so, 9 months flies by, right? Like there is so much, especially for somebody who comes into it as a real sort of newbie to the world of birth, to learn and to unlearn and to unpack. And I know that with working with you, part of what I do is you had this journal, and there are journal prompts in there, so questions that I'm encouraging you to like explore and to journal about, write about, and unpack for yourself. And those are the questions. It's like questions about when do you find it hard to set boundaries in your life, or where you're acting as the people pleaser rather than out of choice. Are you inclined to say no when you want to say yes, or say yes when you want to say no? And starting to sort of like explore these things that, like I say, often they're happening quite subconsciously, and yeah, being the people pleaser, being the good girl, being I'm going to trust the authority figures and not myself. I'm going to keep subscribing to the belief that my body is inherently faulty when it comes to birth, or that my intuition is woo-woo nonsense or whatever. Does not serve you at all in the lead up to birth. So there's suddenly all this work to do, and it's like far out, it's overwhelming, and it's a lot. And I think for a lot of people, it's really, really hard to accept that as the mother, as the person who's growing our baby and birthing our baby and who's going to be raising our baby, we are the ones who need to take the reins of responsibility around for the decisions that we're making in our pregnancies, and in our birth, and obviously in our mothering, when it can be so much less confronting to just say, oh no, I'm going to leave all the decision making up to the experts, because it's scary, right? To like have to take on all the responsibility for these big choices that we know are going to impact our child's life. And there are never any guarantees in pregnancy and birth. Like there's never any guarantees in life. I mean, there's risks in everything, any options that we choose. So I think for a lot of people, it's hugely daunting to say, right, I'm this child's mother. I'm the one who's responsible for the choices that get made around how this baby comes into the world. Because what if something goes wrong? What if my baby dies? What if, what if something goes wrong in the birth and I don't have time to get to the hospital? Or, so there's all these fears that we need to unpack and like consider and work through. But we are the ones who are responsible for our baby. And I talk about this in my like Soulful Birth courses, when that maternity care falls away a few weeks postpartum, you're it. you're the one who's making the 101 decisions every day on behalf of this other little being. And you can't, there's no manual, there's no expert opinion that's going to know how to read your baby, your child better than you, who's going to know, what's going to serve them best better than you. I mean, different story if something's going wrong and you need, medical opinion, of course, that's another choice you're going to make. Now's the time I need to get my kid to the doctor, or to the hospital, whatever. But yeah, it's like, so we need to start practicing that tough thing of like being the person who is responsible for another person's life, well-being, health, all those things. We need to start practicing that in pregnancy. And yeah, and I loved so much watching you on that journey, just more and more going, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to get there. And yeah, you trying to convince me at the start of your pregnancy that, going with this doctor might be a good idea. Yeah, he does scans every pregnancy, every appointment, and whatnot. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not convinced that sounds like it's in fitting with what you're describing to me you want your birth to look like. But you're on your journey, and there's no me gonna, like, I'm not gonna be pointing these things out to you. I'm just here to ask questions for you to like delve into yourself a bit more. Yeah.
Well, it started like, I think more and more, and this is more of like a self-knowledge thing, you get to know when that conflict of intuition and truth is happening. And I think how I chose to be a mother was very much that. Like there was a conflict between my intuition and what I wanted versus the path that was sort of laid out. And then same thing, it was like, this is the path that's laid out, but my intuition is telling me something. And now like, when you get into that sort of mind spiral of should I, and I don't know, and maybe, and it's like, well, clearly you're not following your intuition, or else that indecision wouldn't be there. And getting better at getting closer and quicker at defining like, no, this is what my intuition tells me, this is my choice, this is what's right for me, this is what's right for my body, this is right for my life, and now including a child. And that's been getting more and more refined through this whole initiation that is like pregnancy and birth, is my capacity, even up to making the choice of the pediatrician we chose, and are we going to do vaccinations, and all of these decisions that, I made. There's been less and less indecision and more clarity and more conviction of like, no, this is what we're doing. And I don't care what anyone says. And it's funny, like, more that I make those decisions and get clear and strong, then I meet other people who have the same decisions and who have the same value systems, and like just caring less and less what people think. And I think going through pregnancy and going through a home birth successfully gives you that confidence. You're like, I can do this. Like I don't know, it's having being on the other side and having been through the birth process, which is such, I mean, it's like there's nothing like it in terms of you guiding yourself into the darkness and out of the darkness and like through death and birth, like all of it's just so insane. And going through that and coming out of it, you're just like, I don't care what anyone says about my decisions. Like, I have this power within me and I'm going to follow it. And right now, this is totally unrelated, but it kind of is. Ivan and I actually mentioned this to Glenn, we're considering a move to Asia. um, to leave America for a bit and raise our child internationally. Ivan's Asian and speaks Mandarin, and so we're looking at Singapore. And I feel so convinced on this. I'm like, no, I want to do this. Like, I want to raise my child internationally. I want him to be bilingual. I want us to be, in a different kind of community. Like, I just feel so convinced. And I'm starting to like get to know my voice as a mother. And I think an old version of me would have been like, but what about my family? What about my mom? And like, I can't leave because of this, and just different forms of people pleasing.
Mhm.
But this decision, I'm like, yeah, it's going to disappoint people for sure. But like, this is my family, and this is the decision that I think is best for us. And so it's gradually like that muscle is getting stronger. And yeah, at the beginning of pregnancy, it was pretty weak, and slowly started to strengthen it and just like build it. And birth 100% is like the biggest gym for that muscle ever.
Mhm. I love that birth is the biggest gym for that muscle ever.
Yeah, because you're just like, I mean, you go through
You walk
that,
through that
but
fire, right? Like,
yeah, like getting through that is like insane.
mm.
And I don't know.
How did you said you talked about like building that muscle, and what I'm hearing there is that muscle that's like noticing when your intuition is speaking to you, trusting your body or the messages that are coming through, at least in part, that's that muscle. How did you exercise that muscle? How did you grow that muscle during your pregnancy? What things contributed to that muscle getting bigger?
Spending a lot of time alone, and a lot of time in reflection. And I mean, I'm very fortunate that I'm an acupuncturist and I work with women. So I see a lot of women in my practice who get confused by the medical system, and that leads to not the best results. So I was able to have these examples and reflect on like, do I want that? Or do I want like, I could see the other side of the story and be like, I don't really want that as my reality. Um, so definitely fortunate that that's my work experience, but also, yeah, spending a lot of time alone and questioning and envisioning, doing a lot of visualization. One of the exercises, or I think you asked me, like, what's the birth that you want? And just doing a lot of visioning of what kind of birth I wanted, and sticking to that, not wavering on what I wanted. And that's the mindset work of just getting that clarity of vision, and this is going to happen. And I'm going to make this happen. And just continuing to affirm that internally was just a daily practice. And so that daily practice, eventually, that's the strengthening, because you're just continuing to, it's like neuroplasticity, just like continuing to affirm that this is going to be my experience. This is going to be my experience. And it was my experience. Like I did achieve in terms of the birth very much what I wanted. And it did have, I think all birth is traumatic. Like I will say that it's funny, last week I got the flu and I was having body aches. And I had PTSD from birth. Like I was having pains that were reminding me of the birth. And I started in birth, I was shaking a lot, like I was shivering and like kind of convulsing. And I started to shake like birth. And so, and I was having these like memories come up. So I will say that no matter what, birth is traumatic. And so it's important, I think, to just hold that for all women, that you can have a beautiful home birth, which I feel like I did, but there's still a level of going through that kind of pain and going through that intensity that is, it's a trauma for the body no matter what. And it's a trauma for the baby too. And so I kind of knew that too, and I was like, I want to limit that as much as possible. That no matter what, going through this intense experience, it's very hard on the nervous system and it requires a lot of recovery. So I am going to, that's what gentle birth, right, is all about, is how do I make that inherently intense experience as gentle as possible? And I just
Mm.
visioned into what does that look like? What does a truly gentle birth experience look like? And maybe for some women, and I do see, especially in the hypnobirthing community, women who like go through birth and have no pain at all, that's possible. But I knew for me, like that there was going to be a level of pain and trauma no matter what. And I was just convinced to make it as minimal as possible. And so visualizing that was a big part of my practice.
Mm. Mm. Were there any other sort of standout challenges for you in preparing for your birth?
Um, well, not really. I actually like surprisingly by the end I was very confident in myself. Like I was a lot more worried about postpartum.
Yeah.
A lot more worried about breastfeeding, a lot more worried about my mental health postpartum. With birth, I was just like, it felt like I was going to be just doing the hardest workout of my life. And I was like, I'm ready. Let's do this. And that's another piece that really prepared me. I worked out a lot in my pregnancy. Like I did CrossFit, I hiked, I did yoga every day. I worked out a lot and I just pushed my body a lot during the pregnancy physically. And I was lifting weights and like I can't do any of that now. I'm like the total opposite. Um, but in pregnancy, I felt really strong. And so I just got into this like warrior mindset full on in pregnancy. And I was like, I am doing this. And yeah, birth like was way harder than I thought it would be. It totally kicked my butt,
Mm.
100%.
Mm.
But I did it. And again, there was never any moment during the birth of no of like maybe we should look at like not it was just smooth sailing from the provide for my providers. They're like, oh, that was so easy and
Mm.
so uncomplicated. From my side, I was like, that was hell on earth. Like, what? But for
Yeah.
them, it was like just another day. It's so easy, so simple. Um, Crazy.
I'm so looking forward to you sharing about your birth. But there's just two things that come to mind that I would like you to share about before we do that. And one is that I remember our last sort of official, session together that we had over Zoom, and you said, I feel really confident about the birth. I'm feeling really good about all that. I'm feeling great. And your big stress was the postpartum and especially breastfeeding and the big decision making, things like vaccination, that you knew you were going to have to be looking into and making decisions about. And then, but we can come back and talk about what you did to prepare for your postpartum and that shortly. But then I remember the next time we connected, you were asking me about stretch and sweeps and
Oh yeah.
what did I
Hey,
feel about that? Because
yeah.
you'd gotten to your due date and so yeah, there was that stress creeping in of because I think you thought baby would be there by your due date or on your due date, like we do, right? Like we have this big sort of focus. And as much as the likes of me or anyone else tells you, don't focus on that date. It's, it's easier said than done when you're desperately looking forward to meeting your baby. And you've been waiting for what feels like for so long. And
That
yeah.
week was like the big, like, last hurdle, that
Yeah.
from 40 weeks to 41 weeks,
Yes.
because it was, I was, yeah, feeling great. Like, I trust my body, everything's great. And then, like, nothing was happening. Like,
Mm.
no, nothing was happening. And I didn't trust my body, and I got scared. And I was like, I remember one night, I think I hit like a rock bottom moment. I didn't feel him kick or something. And it was midweek of my 40th week. And I was like, what if he's like stillborn? And like, I started totally spiral. And Ivan had it with me, and he was just like, he's like, fine, if you want to go to the hospital, go to the hospital. I was like, no, I'm not going to the hospital. Like, no way. Like, stop. And I just had to get my act together, because I knew that I couldn't freak out, and I had to come back to my center. And those last few days were really important, because I had taken off work at 38 weeks, which I don't think I'll do if I get pregnant again. I don't think I'll do that again. But it gave me a lot of time. And I needed those 2 weeks. I definitely needed 38, 39. I didn't need that last week in terms of getting things ready and like the logistics. So I was kind of left in like this no man's land of like nothing to do, just waiting for this baby. And so I just started hiking every day and getting back to my center, and like talking to the baby and connecting with myself, and like just trusting that he would come. And I still look back and I'm like, it's absolutely a miracle that I went into labor. I mean, I can't believe it. It's like, it's sort of like if you're really constipated, you're like, I can't believe that I finally have like that your body actually did it. Like, it's insane to me. And we knew, like, Ivan and I kind of knew that it was happening before. We had taken, it was a Saturday, and we took a really long hike. And in LA, there's this very famous salad called the labor salad. And I think it has castor oil in it. No one knows, but the assumption is it has castor oil. We got the labor salad. It was kind of a joke. It was like, you have to get the labor salad if you're at 41 weeks. We got the labor salad that night. I went into labor. But it was a lot of things. It was like we took this long hike. We like were intimate. We had a really calm night. It was just like a lot of oxytocin. We took a walk on the beach, and I just finally relaxed. And that's when I went into labor. And I think I needed to get to that place of, it needed to be a weekend because he needed to be home from work. Like, just needed to feel safe. And what was so interesting, we can get to the labor and all of that, but on the day that I went into labor, I had like early labor for an entire day, and I had contractions. But then we decided to go to Whole Foods because we wanted to like get last minute things. And like, and my midwife doula, she was like, she wanted to give me the like midwife's brew, like the castor oil smoothie, and she wanted me to have the supplies on hand in case I needed it at like midnight or whatever, which I ended up taking. So she's like, you need almond butter and pineapple juice or whatever it was. And so we were like trying to order. I had never ordered groceries online. We were like trying to order groceries online. We couldn't figure it out. We're like, let's just go to Whole Foods. So we went, and it was so interesting. And I'm kind of glad I did. My contractions stopped when I got into Whole Foods, because I mentally was like, I can't be in this, I can't do both right now. And then as soon as I got back into the car, I had a contraction. And because I was alone and like in a safe place, I was like, wow, no wonder women struggle in hospitals. Like, as soon
Mhm.
as I was in like a public anything, all of those contractions that I was having all day long
Yeah.
just stopped.
Yeah.
And so it was just an interesting experience, actually. It was like I was on the biggest ayahuasca journey of my life. And then I walk into Whole Foods and I'm like totally sober and normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. And so it was so, I was just so grateful that I made that decision. And then we could come back home and just be home. And I could be, on my birth ball and in my bath. And we played music. And it was like, we totally set the stage. But that experience was very interesting and makes me feel sad that like we blame women, or not blame women, we kind of blame women, but like we say that their labors are slow, or like we need to
They
induce, or
failed to progress is actually,
yeah,
we do a lot of women blaming or blaming their bodies at least for
yeah,
failing in some way, shape.
exactly. But it's like, of course you can't progress.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I couldn't progress with like a tiny bit of fluorescent light over me and like a few people in a supermarket, like let alone fluorescent lights and people yelling and beeping and
Yeah.
like, wow. So yeah, but the whole thing was just astonishing, and that like it actually worked, and that I was able to give birth. Like I'm still shocked about it.
Yeah, tell us, share the story. We'll come back to the postpartum planning when we talk about postpartum planning.
Yeah, so we kind of had that day of like really, we both were ready. We like wanted, I did not want to go to 42 weeks. I was like, I really want, and I couldn't do a sweep because I wasn't even dilated. So like there was nothing, nothing. My doctor was like, we can't do anything, sorry. Um, so I would have done it, but like I just couldn't. And then so we did all the things, we did the labor salad, and then that night at 2 a.m. I woke up and I was like, I think I'm having contractions. And it was like really strong period pains come mixed with like nausea. And that just started and didn't stop essentially. But that day, that was Sunday, it was light. So like that's when we had walks on the beach and we went through the neighborhood, and it was really nice. It was like we joked a lot. It was really kind of a beautiful time. And Ivan was um tracking the contractions, and it was funny because he'd be like, is it a light contraction, is it a medium contraction, is it a heavy contraction? And I would be like, light, medium, heavy. And then my doctor, she messaged, she's like, so where are you at? And he sent her this like spreadsheet of like light, medium, heavy. And she was like, what's light? What's medium? She's like, all I care about is the heavy. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, she's like, what are you doing? And it was like such a joke, the whole thing. And then finally they did get heavier. She's like, I don't care about light contractions. And then at 10 p.m., they got very strong. And I took a bath, and that's when like I started to go into this like other dimension a little bit. And I called my doula. And in retrospect, I honestly wish I had called her a little later. But I wish I kind of, because when she came, it disturbed me a little bit. Like it like disturbed the energy. But anyway, she came, and she got me like on the birth ball, and she wanted to like really get things going. So that's when I think at midnight I took a castor oil smoothie. And then contractions really started going. I was 1 centimeter dilated or something at that point. And then I just labored, and it was horrible. Like I was vomiting at the peak of every contraction. I felt really I couldn't I tried different positions, but like I was just on my side. And my doula was like, actually being on your side helps. Like she was like, that's a good um it it makes, I don't know, she was like, that's a good space to be in if you can handle it. Just be on your side with like one leg up. And I just kind of kept moving through each contraction, and I felt like it would never end, and I would be in this pain forever and nothing would ever happen. Then at 3 a.m. we called the doctor, and I just like wanted her to come so badly. Like because she was really my like rock in this, which I'm just grateful that I had her. And she came, and she did check my cervix and I was 5 centimeters. And so I was happy about that, that there was like something happening. Because that's the thing about labor, like all other pain, there's like an end and a solution. With like labor is like you don't know where you're at. There's no,
Yeah.
it's just so unknown.
Mm.
So it is nice to have to be, it was nice for me to be checked. Like I'm glad I had a little bit of structure to be like, okay, there is like a path that we're on. Um, but then I think they left the room. I don't even remember anyone else there with me. I don't, yeah. The dog was there, Ivan was there. I don't know what they were all doing. I think they were like setting up the pool and they were like doing their own thing. And I was just wailing, like out of control, like as primal as it gets, screaming and crying and vomiting and just like everything, mostly in bed, a little bit in the shower. I would kind of go in and out of the shower. And then around 6 a.m., my doctor wanted to check me again, and I was 9 centimeters. And it was like the hallelujah moment. I was like, so, I was just shocked that all that work, and I was like, oh my God, there's an end. Like, I didn't even think he's coming. I just wanted the pain to stop. And then pushing started shortly after we went to the tub and pushing started, and she coached my doctor coached me very like to push very slowly because she didn't want me to tear. So it was a very meditative thing, and it was coached but not like push. It was just like next contraction, like start pushing, and it was like very gentle and very slow, um and it was with each contraction, which I didn't really realize that that's how pushing happens. Was like you have a contraction and then you use that contraction to push. And again, I felt like nothing was happening. And there was a moment where I got very scared and I was like, he's going to be stuck and I'm going to be here forever. And I freaked out. And that's again, my doctor came in, Dr. Fabian was like, do not bring negativity into this room. We like your words hold power. And she's like, if you bring negative words into this space, like that's what's going to come. And be careful what you say. Your words are powerful. We are positive. He is coming. You're doing great. And I mean, she didn't say it like that. She said it like a lot harsher. And I got myself into shape. And then I started this mantra of like, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And that was like this big internal shift of like, I can do this. He's coming. And then he slowly, like, it started to happen. Like Ivan saw his head and I didn't know what was happening. And they moved me to the bed because they said the pressure of the water was restricting me a little bit. And then I think like 2 pushes on the bed and he was born. And it was like the whole thing, there was no like orgasmic birth. There was none of that. It was painful from start to finish, except for the early labor part. The early labor part was kind of nice. I enjoyed those contractions actually. It was like I was just so grateful to be in labor. So excited. But active labor, yeah, can like throw like I was just totally put in my place. But then he came and he cried immediately when he came out and he was so healthy and like had full color and he's like started to latch and it was so funny. Like I had done a consult with a lactation consultant and she just happened to text me and when I looked at my phone probably like I'll get to that, but um, he's he started to latch and the midwives left all of us, or me, Ivan, and Sage alone with my placenta. My placenta came out super easily. It was maybe 10 minutes later. And that was like the final relief. Like I felt such relief after the placenta came out. My whole body just like opened. And yeah, they put the placenta next to me and Sage was there and Ivan was there. And it feels like a big blur, but they left, and I think they were like preparing herbs and all sorts of stuff they prepared for me. And it was crazy. It was beautiful. And then we just stayed in bed. I mean, it was like home birth's amazing because we just stayed in bed. And I remember like they were like, you have to go to the bathroom. I was like, can't get up. Like I thought I was gonna like have to be in bed forever. I couldn't imagine standing up. Um, and my mom came over and brought food. And then this lactation consultant happened to text me, like, how are you doing? And I was like, I just had a baby. Like, can you please come over? And she's like, yeah, I'll be over in 10 minutes. And she came over and she was like helping me latch. And then like one of my friends came over and it was just like, it was at 8 a.m. He was born. So it was really nice. We had the full day just to like languish in this like beautiful, blissful, I mean, it was so beautiful that day. I just, if I could, yeah, I just like would relive it 100 times. It was just so we were just so high, and
Yeah.
it was, and that's the thing about unmedicated birth. I just, because I wasn't medicated, like I had all these incredible love hormones, and Sage was like so alert, and he fell asleep. I think we all fell asleep for a little bit and then woke up, and I don't even remember. And that first, I don't even, I was really nervous about the first night, but I don't remember it being anything challenging. And he slept in bed with us ever since. So like he's very like our home has been such a sacred space. And it's the home that Glenn and I were in. It's like this home has been our little nest, and it's small, and it's like our space. And Sage feels, we did a little trip up to the mountains, and Sage was super fussy. And then as soon as we got home, he was like so cool. He was, he like, he knows this place. Because he never left. And
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
even a pediatrician does home visits,
Yeah.
like everyone does home visits, like we just don't take him anywhere. I'm a little spoiled about it, but and we decided not to do vaccines. We didn't do vitamin K. We did like, we have these drops that we do once a week. Um, so yeah, he's had no circumcision. Like we just didn't do any medical interventions at all. No, he just got his birth certificate like 2 months later. Like we just like really off grid, it felt like.
And
Um,
this was such the vibe you were giving off when well, firstly, when we got I was in bed with Glenn when I received your message of having just, given birth, and you'd sent through some photos, and it was just like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've done it, this is so cool. I was feeling the oxytocin high across the other side of the world. Um, but then we connected maybe like a week or so after you'd given birth, and over Zoom. So, you're across the screen from me, and you were like this like, I don't know, so zen, and you didn't have you didn't have any top on. You just had your baby against your body with a beautiful blanket over him, and you just looked like this mothering goddess, and like you were just exactly where you should be in life. And I was like, that is what having a beautiful start, a beautiful peaceful, undisturbed birth does for that's how it's designed to work, is to set you up so that you feel this confidence. You were exuding this, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm this child's mother. I've got this. We are so in love. This is
that is.
just how it's meant to be. Yeah, it's how it's meant to be. And it just lit me up so much. But yeah, no, I know you've had your challenges, and we were talking about this before we started the podcast recording, but like the challenges that you've had, especially around the breastfeeding. um I'm like, they're big challenges, right? But they likely would have been impossible
Yeah.
challenges had you had a traumatic start, had you had the typical hospital birth experience that most first-time mums have. And you agreed, right? Like, yeah, you could totally see the
Yeah,
point of.
I mean, the fact that I mean we've just been so positive. I mean, Ivan and I were speaking last night. Like every night we have dinner together and we do like a prayer before our meal. And that's, I mean, it's amazing to me that we've done that ever since we had like 2 nights maybe after the birth where we didn't have like our dinner together, but like every night we've had our routine. I've been doing yoga every day. Like we do walks on the beach every day. Like we just have this really calm home, even when Sage is going insane. He's not a perfect child. He cries and screams. Like it's it happens, but like mostly we're just have this really calm household, and we've maintained like our really prayerful space, and our relationship has been really calm and beautiful and like supportive. Of course, I mean, you can't go through parenthood without having like a few moments with your partner of like, what are you doing? And no, I know, like whatever that. But like mostly it's just we always have music playing. It's just really been beautiful. And yeah, 100% the home birth set the stage for that. And for Ivan, I mean, him seeing that, he was just like, he was like, I can't believe you did that. Like, oh my God. He was just in awe. And it totally changed his view and his perspective on things, and also wanting Sage to be more natural and trusting that Ivan's not like me and he believes in the medical system. Um, but I think seeing all of this has shown him that there's another way of doing things. And it's been just so beautiful to kind of this whole experience of the postpartum has honestly just been really beautiful. Even, yeah, I have a breast reduction, so I have a low supply. I can't breastfeed normally. I have to use a supplemental nursing system. I have to pump constantly, and it's fucking hard and it's an hassle. So it's not been easy, but it's okay. And that's the thing. It's like, I think if I had that plus having to recover from a traumatic birth and medications and
Mhm.
yeah, it would have been absolutely impossible to produce even the breast milk I'm producing now. And to have the energy to pump and triple feed and wake up in the middle of the night and like all the things that I'm doing. And so,
And have the mental and emotional capacity, right?
yeah, yeah, to just and to be persistent with it. And I've had candida in my breast, I've had mastitis, like breastfeeding has been really tough.
Mhm.
And I think I'm gonna get to the other side and it's gonna get better, but like so far it's not been the easiest. And that's it's again like we can't expect everything to be perfect. And so the choices we can make to optimize this experience are really critical because yeah, there will be things that are just
Out of
body.
control. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that are just like, and it for me it was breastfeeding. For some women it's going to be the birth. For it's just for some people there's something with the child. Like there's so many things that can happen in this process. So I think the things that we can choose and make decisions around and prepare for and to some degree control
Yeah.
that like we really have to take ownership of those things.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's a big lesson for me is like not everything's going to be this picture perfect thing,
Mm.
but it's all about like the overall direction, like the overall picture. If one specific thing, one little thing is off, okay, but like the overall picture. And an old version of me would have focused, an old version maybe last week would have focused on the like that one thing that's not working. And I think the practice for me now and like motherhood is like, what's the big picture here? Not the one broken, string that is like falling behind, but like the bigger viewpoint. And because I chose a home birth and because I did all of this, like I have a really good big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you talked about that with having had breast reduction surgery, it meant that you can't produce the full milk supply. You have to supplement feed your boy. You have to do a lot of pumping. But you acknowledged that it's amazing that you have been able to make as much milk as you have. And we've already talked about how the birth process has contributed to that. What else did you do in terms of preparation or, support? Like what else has enabled you to get through that, the challenges of breastfeeding in the ways that you have?
I mean, having support, like having a good lactation consultant really helped. But again, it all comes down to education. So with breastfeeding, I learned about the first week and the skin to skin, the bed sharing, all of the things that go into a positive breastfeeding relationship, or like independent of breast reduction, so just normal breastfeeding. And so learning about that helped me to enact those things early on. So I made the decision to bed share. I made, we do a ton of skin to skin. I chose not to use bottles or pacifiers or any replacement. When we supplement, we use a tube instead of a bottle. So he stays at my breast. Um, just all of these things that I learned about early on. Nutrition, we got a Chinese medicine food delivery service so that I had really good nutrition and herbal support. I, knew all of these things before, so I put all those structures in place to optimize my capacity. And now, yeah, I mean, I'm producing probably 90% of his milk supply. That's at 7 weeks postpartum. So, and I really
Yeah.
do feel confident that it's going to grow because it's at one point, like Ivan, of course, like graphed it all out. And like in the beginning, it was all donor. We used all donor. That's another thing. I reached out to my community and I got a freezer full of donor milk. So I was like fully prepared with a ton of donor milk. Thank God I did that because we've been really relying on that donor milk. And to any women listening who have an oversupply, like donor milk is, I mean, it makes me emotional. Like it is very powerful and it really helps people. Because if you don't have to use formula and you can use donor milk, as a mother, you feel better about that. And we really used and continue to use the donor milk. And so it does really help a lot, especially when you're talking about a newborn.
Mm.
I'm okay. I'm not totally against formula. I got a really good one from Germany. I haven't used it yet, but I think after 6 months, I will probably use formula. And I feel better about using formula after 6 months than like my 1 week old baby. Like I just did not feel good about that. And everyone else would be like, just use formula. Like, what's the big deal? Like, just give him a bottle. Like, so for me, that was just not going to be the situation. And those are decisions again that I just was not wavering on. And so, and I was really grateful like for everyone that donated, and we'll probably continue to need donations to get us through this first, year. We'll see. I mean, maybe my supply will pick up, but nonetheless, whatever happens, it's all sort of in its own space. I think I'm gonna have to go soon because of the baby, but yeah. Yeah.
We can wind this up now, Natalie, if that would suit your needs in terms of looking after your boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you thank you so much for this like incredible share. What a gift to
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share and for all of your help and everything.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's been
seriously.
so special going on this journey with you, and just all the circumstances surrounding it. It just felt, yeah, like a pretty precious moment in time. And yeah, and it's been really generous of you to share with my listeners as well, your story. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.